Good evening, and good evening. Welcome to the Engaging Males of Color event this evening in partnership with First Person Arts called Beyond Numbness and Anger. We want to thank you for joining us today and every day as we move towards wellness and emotional well-being and mental health for men and boys of color. We want to get things started this evening with an excellent piece by a great colleague of ours, a friend, Jack Drummond, who does not only phenomenal work in our community, but also is a violinist, always performing for events and programs across the city of Philadelphia. He designed and created a special piece for this evening. So please give us our introduction by Jack Drummond. And thank you again, Jack, for that performance and for that creation. My name is Gabriel Bryan again, and I am the coordinator for the Engaging Males of Color initiative here at the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. My role essentially is to make sure that we are looking at increasing access and awareness to behavioral health services for men and boys of color here in Philadelphia, as well as looking to reduce the stigma around behavioral health and wellness, as well as working towards figuring out how to find ways to build health literacy. We want to welcome again tonight to Beyond Numbness and Anger. Feel free again to say hello to your friends and loved ones and folks in the chat. Say hello this evening. We want to first of all acknowledge and thank our executive management team, including our commissioner, Dr. Jill Bowen, as well as our Planning Innovation Deputy Commissioner, Roland Lamb, for their tireless support in the area of wellness for our men and boys of color here at the department. We also want to thank our community-based services unit for their ongoing love and support within the work of EMOC. We also want to thank Jamie Brunson and the entire First Person Arts team for this wonderful partnership and for being such a valuable partner. Lastly, I must thank our EMOC planning team, many of whom have joined us tonight. Beyond Expectations is our effort to help us promote mental wellness for men and boys of color. We intend this evening to think about how do we think about numbness and anger. It's obviously been a challenging year for many of us through a variety of reasons, from homicide to COVID to the election to civil unrest. While we also came to grips with just the realities around disparities that face men and boys of color every day. And so we're going to unpack some of those ideas, some of those experiences, and some of those truths this evening. Together we can overcome, and together we can thrive. And so we want to thank in advance all of our storytellers this evening for their honesty and vulnerability, and who have worked so hard up to this moment. We will have a survey for you to complete towards the end of the program that will allow us to be more informed about upcoming activity for EMOC. And we also hope that you will support our upcoming EMOC podcast, #us Love in the Heart of the City, which will be debuting February 15th. Shout out to our producer, Stephanie Renee. So once again, feel free to follow us on Twitter at EMOC Philly. And thank you for being here. And we hope that you are inspired by this evening's program. With that being said, we want to welcome our colleague and friend and dearest from First Person Arts, Jamie Brunson.
Thank you so much, Gabe. Thank you for your introduction. First Person Arts has been an honored partner with the Department of Behavioral Health for 6 years now, creating programming like what you'll see tonight that gives voice and amplifies the true stories of males of color in this city. First Person Arts is an organization. That's all we do. We help people take their true personal stories and develop them into art for the stage, the page, on air, and online. And we have been privileged to hear and help males of color develop their stories to be shared on multiple platforms as part of this partnership. For tonight's event, we actually surveyed the community and asked, in light of everything that's happened in 2020, what is the most important thing that you want us to explore through EMOC programming? By far, the number one topic was numbness and anger. And so tonight we will be presenting to you storytellers who will be sharing their experiences around the trauma that we've all dealt with this past year, and for many of us, generational trauma. And we'll be unpacking those experiences that we have in common, that are unique and shared. And we will also be talking about how to access services. It is okay to ask for help. It is okay to pick up the phone when you need to talk to somebody. And the Department of Behavioral Health and the EMOC team are committed to helping you move through the experiences that we're all sharing and go beyond the numbness and anger. So enjoy tonight. Please reach out to us, get involved, tell us what kind of things that we can explore as we continue to share this programming. We love you. We appreciate you. Enjoy.
Thank you, Jamie. And right now, I'm actually delighted to welcome somebody who is very special to us as well at DBHIDS, somebody who we know and love. Dr. H. Gene Wright II is the director of the Behavioral Health Justice Division, the newest division of the Philadelphia Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. This division launched in 2020 with a focus on providing equal opportunities for treatment, support, and community integration for justice-involved Philadelphians with behavioral health challenges. Dr. Wright is a transformational, highly experienced, and professionally trained clinical and forensic psychologist with more than 20 years of experience in behavioral health and proven success in leading people in managing projects and initiatives in government and private practice. With that being said, he will help us kind of unpack this evening's stories. Thank you, Dr. Wright.
Thank you so much, Gabe. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone, and I'm looking forward to hearing the stories of the men that are going to share with us this evening and to invite us into their experiences so that we together can learn how to heal, how to support one another, and to understand that it's okay to not be okay from time to time. But as Jamie said, we have the ability to reach out to one another, pick up the phone, get on the Zoom call, do whatever we need to do to let people know that we are here for each other. With that being said, Gabe, thank you again, and I'm looking forward to working with you and the men this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. And so we want to get right to our first storyteller, somebody who joined us a couple of years ago for our amazing Coming Home event, Che Guerrero. Che Guerrero has spent 12 years tackling race, marriage, and work through stand-up comedy. He is a revolutionary voice on the modern comedy scene. Che's style is rooted in his experiences growing up undocumented. His sense of humor and command of the stage is the result of obstacles often unseen by the average American. In 2014, Che broke out on the New York scene with a feature on Gotham Comedy. He released his first album, Thank You, That's My Time, in 2016, and continued to hit every stage from the Hoboken Comedy Festival to the Laughing Skull Comedy Festival. By 2018, Che was being highlighted on BET as part of 50 Central's Artist Spotlight. With that being said, let's bring on Che Guerrero. What's up? How you doing, brother?
Hey,
good seeing you.
I'm good. Thank you for having me, guys. Good to see you again.
Yes. Look forward to hearing your story this evening and how we could impact as we move beyond numbness and anger.
Kind of deals with that. I was undocumented in this country for 23 years. And when you grow up undocumented, that means, no access to, no access to healthcare. I can't get a job. Every time I apply for something, I'd be freaking out that they were going to look at my background. There was I saw no future for myself. And actually, one of the reasons why I started doing comedy at 18 was because I couldn't go to college, and I was like, I need to be resourceful. And growing up undocumented, every interaction you have with the authorities is scary. Like, being deported is a real daily fear in your life. But the problem around my house was that my mom used that like it was the boogeyman just to get me to do things she wanted all the time. That's horrible, right? You shouldn't scare your own babies with ice. That's not right. But this woman is so Latin that she would scare me with ice all the time for any reason. Like, I'd be leaving the house and she'd be like, hey, mira, take a sweater. And I'm like, I don't want a sweater. She's like, oh, you don't want a sweater. Let me tell you what's gonna happen to you. Then she started with those ghost stories. Sit down. You're gonna be outside. It's gonna start getting cold. You're gonna start feeling sick. You're gonna cough. You're gonna faint. Somebody's gonna come. Somebody's gonna call 911. Ayuda! They're gonna take you to a hospital. They're gonna ask you for your social security number. You don't have one. Well, you're gonna get deported. That's all I'm saying. And then she hit me with my favorite line, which was this. And don't call me when you get deported. What? Lady, you are the only person I know in this country. Who else am I gonna call? Honestly, I would have loved to have picked up my ICE just so the phone call how would have gone. Like, hey, we got your baby. Does he have a sweater? Nah, just a t-shirt. He ain't my kid. Click. Left in there.
I love that. I love it.
Watching it again, I'm like, oh my God, it was such a slow roll for people to start laughing. So I'm glad people started laughing.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and I want to make sure that we bring in Doc, Dr. Wright, to kind of share his initial thoughts. But, one thing that obviously comes out for us is the idea about some of the fears around being undocumented, some of those traumas, some of those thoughts as being somebody with lived experience as somebody who's undocumented.
Yeah, what's interesting about watching that clip back is that I always tell people that being undocumented and being part of the immigration system, it's just a game for them where they keep moving the goalpost on you right when you think you're at the finish line. And sure enough, 2 years ago when that clip came out, I thought I was at the finish line. That was supposed to be the year I become a citizen. And then the pandemic, and then come to find out that they found another reason to deny me citizenship. Really broke my heart. So it's just feeling like I'm back to square one every time, with this process.
Yeah, Shan, when we talked before, you had mentioned just the daily grind of not knowing what's next and what knock at the door may be coming and what does that feel like, or even walking in public spaces. And so just thinking about some of our conversations this past 2020, and everything you talked about with moving the goalposts and everything, maybe you can give our audience just a little bit of understanding of what 2020 was like with everything that you just shared and with your thinking, I'm so close. And then the trauma of it, like a rug being pulled out from under you again.
Sure. Yeah, that was actually it really broke me. It was one of the few things that even more than the pandemic, this experience broke me. I was, I used to be a nursing assistant. And actually that was the thing that I started to do when I was 18 years old in order to survive. I was a nursing assistant. All of my credentials are, they're legit, everything I got while I had status. But the life of an undocumented person is you fall in and out of status so much in your life that you're just trying to survive when you're out of status. So when I was 19 years old, I lied on a job application saying that I was a citizen when I wasn't, which is automatic disqualification for citizenship forever. And one thing that I think I told you, Dr. Wright, that I want people to know is when you grow up undocumented, you have a real problem with the truth, because you already have to lie to everybody on every interaction because you don't want them to figure you out or find you out, that you just continue to lie. And to be honest with you, I became a pathological liar, and I had a really hard time with the truth. And it wasn't through a lot of the help from the partner who I'm with today that a lot of those survival mechanisms sort of dissipated. And when I went finally to the moment where I thought I could be a U.S. citizen, I spoke to a lawyer, and she asked me the question that I was dreading: did you lie at any point about being a citizen when you weren't? Now, I knew in me that just telling one more lie will get me to the end. You know what I mean? I just got to lie and say, no, I never did that, and that's it. But you know what? At that moment, I had actually gone back to being a nursing assistant when the pandemic hit. I wasn't doing it anymore, but once I saw how much it was affecting people, and I was raised by a grandmother, and how much I saw, senior citizens really being affected by this, that I renewed my licenses and went back to nursing homes, put myself on the front line. And in the middle of that, I was like, okay, I'm going to become a citizen. I feel like I'm being part of this country. I'm helping during a global crisis. And the lawyer told me that for doing that, I am denied citizenship and I could actually be deported. So it's my choice whether I want to be deported or just continue lying. And I'm just going to be honest. I did it when I was young because I did what I had to survive. And the fact that they're treating me like this hurt. That was the time that I've ever been so hurt in my life. And it's been a lot of trying to process that moment.
Yeah, that's the pain of having a coping mechanism that may have served you when you were a child or when you were younger. It kind of got you through. But then you grow up, you mature, you start living a more adult life as you had described it. And all of a sudden that coping mechanism is no longer viable. It's no longer working for you. And like you said, and all of a sudden that pain, that hurt returns. And then you find yourself with a difficult decision, and then that just kind of exacerbates that hurt. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure we have people out there that can relate to that coping mechanism that is no longer useful. And then what do you do next? You make a decision like you did, which is the healing starts with truth. And I'm going to move forward. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you again for those words and for your honesty and for your truth. Jay, and thank you, Dr. Wright, just for your assessment of what we're dealing with. I mean, I think once again, as you see at the bottom of your screen, we have resources and services available to you. As you're listening tonight to all the stories, make sure that you jot some of these down, or take a picture, take a screenshot of the crawl, because these are all services that can hopefully help you or your loved ones. Somebody, maybe perhaps a neighbor, a roommate, somebody in your family, somebody perhaps that you might not even know, somebody on the workforce. We all could use a little hope sometimes, a little help sometimes. And so hopefully we can be there for each other. With that being said, I actually want to bring up our next storyteller, somebody who also is close to the family here at DBHIDS, really by virtue of his ongoing work with First Person Arts. Neil Barton is the director of applied storytelling at First Person Arts, where he also is a producer for the #Us Unique and Shared Experiences podcast. He serves as executive director at Broad Street Review. Since 2013, Neil has coached speakers and led workshops in applied improvisation, storytelling, and technical communication, helping professionals tell their stories for diverse settings. He's appeared in segments of WHYY's Common Space and The Pulse, and his live speaking credits include First Person Arts, The Story Collider, Nerd Night, Ignite Philly, and The Awkward. With that being said, I want to bring up somebody who is really a dear friend of ours as well, Neil. What's going on, Neil? How you doing, man?
Okay, great to see you. Thanks so much for having me on tonight.
Yeah, and thank you just for joining us. I think, again, this evening is about how we navigate as men of color through experiences and feelings and ideas around numbness and anger. And so we're definitely excited about hearing your story tonight as well. So with that being said, we're going to hear from Neil to tell his story right now. Thank you.
Recently, a friend stopped by my house to pick something up. And he said something to me that I hadn't heard before. Neil, you know that you live in Mafia Central, right? I played it off like I knew exactly what he was talking about, but it shook me. Where I am in Deep South Philly feels kind of set in the past. We're a very residential neighborhood, people from all over the place, and we're insulated, I would say, from gentrification and tourism. And I think I've made some assumptions over time. In the neighborhood, there's a strong contingent of Italian American, South Philly residents, and there are people who I don't know how they identify, but I perceive them as white. And all these folks seem to have some strong South Philly identity alongside connections to their immigrant roots. That's one group. At the same time, you have some families in the neighborhood who are not just new to the neighborhood, but seem very new to the US, people from all over the world. This set of folks is near and dear to my heart. I have my own family history of immigration and coming to this country to have a better life for yourself and for your family members. And so I've started to think a bit more about how do I fit in among these groups. In late May, early June of 2020, when protests were popping off in Center City and all over the country, it felt different to be here. It felt quiet. It felt, by and large, quite safe. My parents and friends from across the country would see violence in Philly on the national news and reach out to me and express concern. I said to them, look, I'm 3-5 miles away from where things are happening. My neighborhood is quiet. Until one day when some folks in South Philly became under the impression that there was going to be Antifa violence coming to Marconi Plaza, specifically to target the Christopher Columbus statue that stands there. Now, in the days preceding, groups around the country and world had toppled monuments to racists and perpetrators of genocide, some of them masquerading as American heroes. And this group thought this was going to happen in our neighborhood. Up until that point, over the course of several weeks and months, Marconi Plaza had become a refuge for my wife and me. It was where we went jogging. It was where we'd throw a Frisbee around or walk around with just a cup of coffee. It was boring. Until some of the local residents thought that there was going to be some violence there, and people started showing up with guns and bats and anger. And the police showed up and seemed to take their side. Again, I started thinking, how do I fit in with all this? I don't think that if I, looking as I do, came to my local park, that my neighbors would like it much right now. Maybe they never did. I don't know. Nobody's said anything, but it's just the vibe that I'd picked up all of a sudden. Over time, it's interesting to see when and where and how I fit in places or don't. Some years ago, I was in Chicago. I got in a cab. The driver, a black guy originally from the southern U.S., turned to me and he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I live in upstate New York. I grew up there." He says, "Yeah, but where are you from?" Well, my dad's from India. My mom grew up in the States. I've been in New York most of my life. Now here I am. "Oh, India, huh? Are you getting to understand American sports?" Like I said, I grew up in upstate New York. I watched the Bills lose 4 Super Bowls in a row. Huh. Well, what about American food? Are you getting used to that? he couldn't understand that I'm from New York. Sometime later, I was in Istanbul for a day. And I was on the subway, and a guy started to come up to me. And as far as I could tell, he was speaking Turkish and asking directions. I don't know. But what I could figure out was, I think he thought I belonged there just as much as I thought he belonged there. I couldn't tell him anything. A little while after that, I was in the Netherlands for a while, and I was on a train one rainy Sunday morning. I was headed to this small town, and the guy next to me, across the aisle, I had him pegged as an American businessman traveling solo. I knew the town and thought it was a little odd that he was there then. So right before we got off, I turned to him and said, "Hey, would you like directions to the airport shuttle? I'm familiar and can point you the way." He turned back to me, slightly puzzled, and he said, "No, I'm fine. I'm staying in town for a little bit. But thank you. Your English is excellent, by the way." He assumed that I was of where I was, despite my American accent sounding just like his. I didn't go to the Marconi Plaza. I watched things unfold on Twitter and Reddit and hoped that people were reporting decently. I knew that if I went there, I would feel unsafe. I knew friends that were going and people were spitting on them. I knew the cops were very clearly on the side of those who showed up to protect the statue. Over time, things died down there. People left. The city agreed to board up the statue. The folks with the guns left, except for the cops, who are now there 24/7 to protect Christopher Columbus's lingering presence. My wife and I started going back to the park. We jogged past the cops. We generally have felt safe there. But one day, we were walking back from the park, halfway between the park and home, and I looked across the street. And there's a guy standing in a doorway of a row home. He looks to be about 60, white. In his left arm, he's holding a baby. And on his right hip, he has a handgun in a holster. And I don't know why he's holding a baby and a gun at the same time. But this guy seems to be my neighbor. Thank you.
Wow, that was very powerful, Neil. And I thank you again, and just for bringing in so many different ideas for us to kind of deconstruct, particularly when it comes to ideas around belonging, racism, white supremacy, and just comfort levels living day to day as a human being, right? But obviously, in this case, here in the city of Philadelphia, what was, as you thought about those instances and even, here in the city, I mean, have you walked past Marconi Plaza recently, of late? And what was the vibe, then?
Yeah, I've been past sometime in the past couple of weeks, not in the couple of days since it snowed, but it's quiet there, right? And the thing that stands out is a giant wooden box that didn't used to be there, protecting a statue, and that's strange. And sometimes I can see where there's a cop car sitting, and sometimes I can't. But it's different than it was a year ago, that's for sure.
Neil, I was struck. First, thank you for sharing that. I was immediately struck by how recent in your spirit, in your soul, that you are still experiencing what happened at Marconi Park, what happened in Istanbul, what happened in the Netherlands on the train, and what happened when you and your wife decided to return to Marconi Park. It's palpable, the emotion and the strain that you continue to feel almost as if something was taken from you that day when you realized Marconi Park is not the same, the neighborhood is not the same. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you could maybe share with our audience, because that's what I felt as you were talking, that loss, that something was taken from you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a point in time that I can pretty much point to on a calendar and say this is when something changed in my understanding of this phenomenon for me, right? People have this, I think, all sorts of times over the years with beliefs and relationships of this is the day where you realize this isn't what it used to be, or maybe it always was like this and now I just know better because something got said out loud. And to me, that day was more something got said out loud by people showing up the way they did.
Yeah. And so each day, obviously, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what have you done to cope through all of this? Right?
That's where I was going, Gabe. What are you doing, Neil?
Yeah, because we got to know, because this is something that affects all of us, right?
Sure, I can point to a bunch of things. One is my wife is an amazing partner in these things. She helps me process a lot. She's very, very gifted like that. I speak to my therapist about it. We have sessions every couple of weeks. She's a Black woman in Philadelphia. She understands certain things about the city, and I process this with her at that time. I journal about it occasionally. I don't journal as much as I tell myself I do, but it is really useful some days to just write down a couple things and say, here is what I felt today. Here's what I witnessed. Let's see what tomorrow brings.
Yeah, that's powerful, Neil. And I think a major issue, and I'm glad you asked that question, Gabe, because one of the challenges is always moving forward after the curtain has been pulled down. And where do we go from here? Now that yesterday is not the same as today, the suggestions that you've given, I think, are going to be really helpful to people who are trying to put that next foot in front of the other and take that next step towards healing. So thank you.
Wonderful. You're very welcome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. Just some powerful stuff there. And again, one of the things that we all realize are the ways that, racism affects our mental health and wellness, right? Racism has an ability to harm in a variety of ways, not only physically, as we've seen throughout history, but certainly mentally and spiritually. We've been impacted as a community through, as was mentioned earlier by Jamie Brunson, through generations. And here it finds itself showing itself even again in 2020 and certainly into 2021. With that being said, we want to bring up our next storyteller. And again, we want to thank you all for your comments and questions and thoughts and ideas that are being shared in the chat. We want to thank you all for the ideas. And we want to thank you again for joining us this evening for Moving Beyond Numbness and Anger. We're going to bring up another phenomenal comedian. He makes us laugh right out of Houston, Texas. He also joined us with Che Guerrero 2 years ago for our Coming Home event. Ali Sadiq, born and raised in H-Town, advocates for community leadership, outreach, and fundraising. This past year, he participated in a Teacher's Lounge comedy show with Fort Bend ISD and another in Houston after Hurricane Harvey. He annually participates in community events throughout the year, and most importantly, during the holiday season to show his love and support for his community. In addition to his philanthropy, Ali headlines multiple comedy clubs around the U.S. and comedy festivals around the world, proving his ability to engage audiences of every demographic while leaving them laughing hysterically. He's been seen on BET's One Mic Stand, Bill Bellamy's Ladies Night Out tour on HBO, the season finale of HBO's Def Comedy Jam, you name it, you've seen him on television, or perhaps here in Philadelphia at multiple stages, from Helium to the Fillmore. He's there making us laugh, but also doing it with the right spirit in our community. That being said, welcome, Brother Ali Sadiq. How you doing?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. Everything's good on your end?
Hey, man, I can't complain. I told my brother down at H-Town that you was going to be on again tonight. So he's joining us as well from the Third Ward.
Oh, I'm in Tampa, man. They got me performing at the Tampa Improv during the Super Bowl. I'm gonna ask which picture am I supposed to be looking at? There's two of them up here. One is on delay and one is crisp.
Just focus on what you see. But with that being said, we want to get right into a clip from Ali Sadiq, and from that clip from Ali, we'll get right into his story. So we're bringing his clip right now.
Is about intake. Because this is the thing that I remember that I know I'm never going back to prison because I don't want to go through intake. You come in, intake is three gates. When you in Texas, it's 3 gates. And you coming in and you got on all your clothes. Got on all your clothes, and it's a spot that probably hold maybe 30 people. They got 250 people rammed in this spot. So you just rammed in intake. And then the officer starts to talk. He starts, and you can't really hear what he's saying because you all in the back. Then you get up there, it's your turn. You get up there and he say, give me your clothes. And he strip you down to your boxers and he puts you in another gate. Now, it's the same 250 people in this gate. And the officer start with his talking again. You're like, what is he saying, man? And I'm a smart individual. I knew if I started with clothes over here, I got on boxes over here. It just seemed like I'm gonna be naked in this next day. It just seemed like nakedness was about to happen. It seemed like
Oh man, thank you for that clip. That was from 2 years ago, and obviously talking about incarceration, not only in Houston but across the country. And that story was thank you for that story of sharing that piece of us. What goes to your mind as you see that clip again, Ali?
When I was actually going through my mind, I was like, yo, I need to get my stomach down, man. I'm just chubby now. It's crazy. That jacket's supposed to feel way better than that. Man, the thing is, I literally just told that story to a group of young men who are finding it hard to find jobs. And then I gave them that story because I wanted to give them a touch of reality that you've been in situations far more detrimental than this. Your mental fortitude should kick in the same way that it kicked in when we was incarcerated, all the things that you did in there to survive. So the same amount of energy that you can put into doing something that may be really not conducive to your freedom, you should put that into staying out. So I use that story to get people to try to trigger people back to what they've been through or what they could possibly go through. So that story is it keeps me free.
Wow.
That actual story, because just to think about somebody telling you to take off all your clothes and to violate you, as it's more of a taking me back to everything I've read in the course of our struggle in this country. So I'm like, man, I don't want that feeling again. So sometimes the things and the you can, I'm not a doctor, but the doctors there, you can take pieces of your traumatic experiences or things that have happened to you and hold on to them for the betterment of you, not to imprison you in those things. Like some people say you shouldn't get angry. I don't tell people not to get angry. I tell people to direct that anger in a positive way. Cause you ever seen the movie Monsters Inc. where they were scaring the children and then they figured out that the laughs had more energy.
Right.
Sometimes that anger for something gives you the energy to change it if it's positively directed in the right place. You know, I remember being mad about people telling me to make it in comedy, you got to go to LA or New York. So I took that energy and my disdain for that ideology and stayed in Houston and made it out of Houston. So now in the industry, they don't just look to LA and New York. They look all over the country because they were like, well, we found this guy named Ali Steak out of Houston that we had no idea about that was pushing through these walls. So it's a mental fortitude through I think this is a thing that people don't exercise. You know how everybody go to the gym and they exercise their arms and they chest, but
they don't work their legs.
Don't work their legs small. So I think people can be on the internet and they can do other things, but do they work that muscle, that brain to be able to take things, be able to deal with things? People get caught up in, am I good enough for this? Am I good enough for that? Where's this mental strength that we supposed to have, or we supposed to develop, or we supposed to encourage? Where's that at?
And I know And I know for you, Dr. Wright, the fact, obviously now you're leading our new behavioral health and justice division, and you're, working with the brothers on the inside, along State Road as well. And obviously the traumas around mass incarceration are so real. Talk to us about what Ali shared and how we can unpack some of those ideas.
Yeah, Ali, what you shared was so powerful. And the brothers that I work with, many of them are what we used to call juvenile lifers. You probably remember that term. But these brothers have left that title. They've left that label, if you will. And they've done exactly what you suggested, Ali. They've taken the trauma, the challenges, the pain, the hurt that they experienced, not just in prison, but most of those brothers, man, they experienced trauma before they went to prison, right? And then they used that and they learned all the things you suggested, and they took that negative, that pain, that hurt, and they turned it into, how can I help others? What can I do for myself to heal? And then they turned around and they gave it to others to heal. And so what I've seen them do is very much, Ali, what you've done. They said, let me get this mental fortitude. Let me take the experiences that I've had and let me turn that into something good. And so you're right. It doesn't always have to remain in that space of what was done to me. It can now be, what can I do for others to see to it that other people do not go down that same road? Or if they do, how can I show them a path to a different road? And that's what it sounds like you've done with your life. It sounds like what you continue to do. And so, Gabe, yeah, man, I've been blessed to work with brothers that have been incarcerated that are now coming out and teaching us. Notice I said teaching us, teaching all of us that what has happened to you is not who you are, but it's what you do with your healing and while you're healing and all the individuals that you impact with your experiences. And then that continues to help their healing. So we're always in recovery continuously. But what you have done, man, and what you have taught others to do, man, my hat's off to you, how you turn pain into laughter for some and into that recovery space, man. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, I so appreciate it, brother. It's the same thing with my father. I told my mother, I'm like, I know that you took care of me my whole entire life, but what impacted me to try to be the best father I could possibly be, to understanding the pain of my not being there. I didn't want my kids to experience that. So that me not having that made me want to give my children that. I didn't want to stay in the whole, well, I didn't have a father. Well, just because I didn't have a father don't mean my kids don't. I don't have to be a good father, or, I can recall all the things that I wanted and implement that. I wanted somebody in the stands to watch me play. I wanted somebody to root for me doing homework. I wanted somebody to, want to take me to just spend a day with me in the park or somewhere. I wanted those things. So I give those things because I don't have my children. I know what my children want because I've been a child before. I'm like, yo, this, I know you want to play. I didn't know what you want to play with, but I know what you want to play. So
yeah, that's fabulous.
Well, thank you, Ali, man. Hey, man, have a great weekend in Tampa too, man.
Hey, man, I'm trying to do it all, brother. I'm trying to do my due diligence for the people, my due diligence for these people, so I can at least have some type of center of gravity in my universe, man. Because this is not just for them, and this is not just for y'all. This is for me as well. This program is another reminder, things that keep reminding you to stay on this path of trying to be better than you were yesterday. So I thank God. I'm gonna go out and thank them. So thanks.
Sounds good, man. That's the way to do it, brother. Take care, all right? Have a good one.
Thank y'all, brothers.
All right.
Appreciate y'all having me.
All right. Yes, sir. So with that being said, what's so powerful again is that we've also been doing, and that's we, meaning EMOC, doing wellness sessions, providing wellness sessions in partnership with the Father's Day Rally Committee for the past 5 years, really to those young men detained right there at 48th at Haverford at the Juvenile Justice Services Center. And it's our work that's been committed to those young men and boys, in fact, who have been detained, who may have made a mistake, who may have made a bad choice, but we know that the end, right, isn't near, right? They still have a whole life ahead of them, and we hope to continue to provide services and resources for those young men. And so we want to thank our colleagues and the team over at the JJSC at 48th and Haverford. With that being said, we want to go to a quick clip that will give us some more information about our upcoming podcast series, which will be getting its debut actually very shortly on February the 15th. We'll be debuting hashtag Us Love in the Heart of the City as we explore several stories of men from throughout Philadelphia, their stories of commitment, their stories of overcoming challenges, and their stories of love ultimately as they thrived here in Philadelphia. Let's get to our clip for hashtag Us.
Including the national convening that we did in the first week of June, right after the George Floyd uprising. In Pennsylvania, we look at the Berks Detention Center, about an hour and 20 minutes northwest of Philly. The majority of the immigrant families that are being held there are Haitians. We're having this conversation around anti-Blackness and unjust policing practices and institutional violence. And at the very same time, these innocent Haitian families who legally came to the United States to seek asylum are being held in a prison among a deadly pandemic without proper safety, without social distancing, in group holding cells. We were able to kind of connect the dots there. And it also led to this really incredible allyship with the Haitian community that featured Japanese taiko drumming as well as Haitian drumming and chanting and singing. So really powerful, a sense of togetherness. And I think there's a hopefulness that comes from that. There are so many communities now in conversation that weren't before.
All right. Again, hashtag Us, February 15th. It'll also be available everywhere that you hear podcasts, available from iTunes to Apple, you name it, it'll be available there. With that being said, before we get to our final speaker and more conversation and question and answer with you, the community, we actually want to deliver a survey for you all that will help us again to kind of be better informed about the programming, who you are as an attendee, who you are as a program participant. And so that survey will actually be dropped in the chat, and you'll be able to complete that survey. And we thank you in advance for completing that survey because, as always, this data helps us to design further programming to support our men and boys of color here in Philadelphia, to support our different neighborhoods, and ultimately to help this initiative continue to flourish with the needs being met and how we address some of these social determinants of health and certainly the disparities that we see for this population, which we know is so important, not only to myself and our EMOC team and the team here at DBHIDS, but to all of us, right? These are our neighbors. These are our colleagues. These are the folks that we see on the train, on the regional rail, on the bus, obviously prior to COVID, but we still see them in the market and certainly out in the street. So we want to make sure that we're all supported and given as much assistance as possible. So that being said, please complete to the best of your ability that survey. And again, we will thank you in advance for that. With that being said, what we want to do is we want to get to our final speaker, but not the final speaker who will be able to provide some insight. This person, again, is just wow. There's so much to be said. And one word that comes to mind from our deputy commissioner is the ways that we must highlight EMOC champions and champions across the city of Philadelphia. And certainly, Edwin Isamore is a champion. He is somebody who has really transformed not only himself, but his community, right? Not only is he, a behavioral health specialist at his former middle school in Kensington, but he is a positive influence and mentor to students, to the community, a support system for teachers. I mean, he could be found supporting the folks over at the Waterloo Rec Center. You might see him spending time in virtual platforms across the country. He is sharing his insight, sharing his truths, and sharing really his, the sum of experiences that challenges us all to kind of work to the deepest recesses of our minds to figure out what does it mean to be healed and what does it mean to remain hopeful. And so with that being said, I want to bring up somebody who, again, is very dear to us, Edwin Isamore. How you doing, Edwin?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you doing?
Hey, man, we're so thankful for you being here. Of course, you joined us a couple of times, actually, for different conversations, from the talk and how we deal with our children, with the police, to fathers and sons in that important relationship, right? And so we thank you for always being committed to this work. And so with that being said, we will get to your clip before we get into further conversation.
Many years ago, I was about 8 or 9, Christmas Eve. It was pretty much a family tradition. You open up one Christmas present. And I'll never forget, me and my cousins, my brother, we were on the kitchen floor and we were playing around with some of the toys, and the police came knocking at the door and they told my father, said, listen, there was a home invasion in the neighborhood. Somebody's dangerous out and about. If you see anything on your property anywhere, please let us know. My father said, no problem. As he walked to the backyard to do a little inspection, behold, he found a man sitting out in the back with a knife. But as a child, I turned around, I looked at my father. All this rage, all this anger was like, how dare you come into my property, my house, around my children, my family. My father jumped right on this man. Started to beat this man. To the point where my mother went outside, alerted the police. The police had to get my father off of this man. This man, when the police came, they grabbed him and they handcuffed him. They started to bring him to the house. And I'll never forget, my father grabbed a rag, and I thought he was being nice to the gentleman. He wiped his face from the blood that my father put on it. He said, I want to remember you when you come home. It's not finished. Then my father turned around to me, and I actually thought he was going back, are you okay? And he looked at me and said, next time you get in it. Next time you come out here and do what you got to do. Kind of like mixed emotion, because I kind of was in shock, believe it or not. That was like one of my first signs of trauma. I seen something unbelievable. But it had me thinking all types of ways. That night I was kind of feeling guilty. I said to myself, you know what? Do I love my family? Do I care about my family? Next day on Christmas, I waited till my family went to sleep. I creeped downstairs. I said, I'm going to prove to everybody I love my family. I took the mop stick off, put a butter knife around it, tied it to it. Went and got a hammer. I was scared to death. I went and stepped by the door. I said, if anybody comes through this time, I'm going to prove it. And I thank God Santa Claus is not real, because he would have caught it in West Kensington.
West Kensington, right?
Good lands.
Yeah, that's right. The Goodlands. That's right, the Goodlands. One thing about that story, before I get over, send it over to Dr. Wright, is that, again, the last year has been tough with so many different issues. But we must also think about the issues that have still been with us for years and years and years that we still are processing even today as adults. As you think about that particular story and what your father meant in that moment, what do you think about now as your father today?
Watching that story again is just a different thought, a different reaction each time. Every time I watch it, I think about something different or something that played out in my life. And when I thought about that, my father was able to step up. It was great to have someone like that in the house to protect us. But he couldn't protect us but for how much to the world, if it made any sense. So you can imagine the stress on any man, any father. That saying, once you become a father or a parent, the world becomes a dangerous place. So it's kind of like, for me, as I have my children, me now trying to say, how do I protect them? Sooner or later, they're going to have to walk out that door. Sooner or later, they're going to take a walk to the store by themselves. Sooner or later, they're going to have to get a job. Sooner or later, they have to get on that bus to go to school. And it's something that's stressful. It's something that's very nerve-wracking as a father, because you want to protect your child at all costs, because you see what's going on in the world and you see what happens. Just one more thing that comes to mind with just watching that clip when you talk about trauma. When you think about our kids that live in these neighborhoods are exposed to the opioid epidemic, exposed to all the violence, what's going on in their homes? Who's protecting them? Who's stopping folks from moving in their house? What I mean their house is their block, their neighborhood. Once you go outside, someone's out there, someone's committing violence, someone's shooting someone, someone's stabbing someone. So who's there to protect them from seeing that? So we have thousands and thousands of children that are being exposed to this every day. And can you imagine, most of these children don't even have a father. So that type of stress that carries along for a young person growing up.
Well, that's so powerful, Edwin, because when you told that story, and of course you had a humorous ending, and we're all talking about how we can add humor to some of the things that are hurtful, but you really honed in on what it felt like to be a child and experience that trauma. I think you said for the first time, you witnessed something that you hadn't seen before. And Gabe and I talked about this, and we talked about this with others. So many boys and girls of color see violent acts in their neighborhoods, sometimes in their home. But what the data tells us is that Black and brown boys see more violence. They experience more violence than other children. And so even though your father was protecting you and all the things that you said that has lingered with you, because now you think about, how can I protect my children? And am I doing enough? And so that adverse childhood experience that you shared with us, that you've taken through your adulthood, now you're really looking at how you can help others protect their children. And so maybe if you could say a little bit about how, yes, that was traumatic for you, but you've turned it into something that has really benefited your neighborhood, your community, and other people with children. And just maybe talk about that for a minute, because that's a powerful story.
I think, thank you. Most definitely, it's just about trying to get folks to realize this is not normal. What you're seeing is not normal, and exposing our young folks to something different. And sometimes something different is not just environmental, it's just maybe language. How you doing? I'm glad to see you. I know.
Sure.
I was 16 years old when I went away, when I got arrested. I was charged with first-degree murder, facing life and death penalty at that time, right? But in my mind, I was wondering, all that, I still didn't realize the seriousness of the crime, because what you saw that was going on in the community you thought was normal. Like, this stuff happens all the time. So you mean to tell me there's consequence behind this? You mean to tell me I can go away? You mean to tell me that you're going to try to take my life? Because this is normal. This is what I see every day. So we have a bunch of young people out here who are running around who don't understand that this is not normal. This is not a normal life. And at the same time, what's stressful is, like, I have children. You got to walk to the store, and and I'm overprotected. My kids are not street smart at all. Right? Dad is the street smart. Dad was the dumb. Right? But I worry about my kids about walking down. If I take them down to visit family in the neighborhood, I'm like, I don't want you going to the store just yet. Let me walk with you to the store, because I'm afraid of what can happen, because they're not street smart. kids from the neighborhood, they know what's going on. They see what's going on. You know, you hear something, you know to duck behind the car. You know to do this. My kids would be walking around with their iPhone out and their earplugs in. You know, I'm like, no, you can't do that way. And it's very stressful for me because I don't know how I'm going to respond if anything happens to my children.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, that is really powerful. And I think one of the things that you shared with us offline, which I think is so important, is that you've taken that fear, you've taken that anguish, that anxiety, as you described it, and you've turned it into something that actually helps people stay safe, and you've helped other people heal from those experiences by using the language that says, hey, it's okay to call this out and say violence, that's not the normal way to live. That's not what you want to do. And so you've helped a lot of young people through PAN. I know you had that experience with PAN and all the things you did there, and great organization. And so even though it may not have totally left you, what you've done, Edwin, is take that experience, expose children to the realities of how you can heal, even through these difficult times. And you keep reproducing that over and over and over again, brother.
Well, I would just say thank you. You mentioned PAN. And mentioning PAN, I have to give a big shout out to Mr. James Mills. He passed away. But this is a gentleman who gave me an opportunity. He gave me an opportunity. He's a perfect example of, he was, I could say, one of my first positive male role models that I really looked up to and paved the way and showed me, like, and when I first saw this man go out to the community trying to create change, I saw that and said, I want to be just like that. You know, and I want to be able to walk the walk that he was walking. And I want a young man to see me out there doing something, saying, I want to be just like that. And shout out to James Mills. I thank you for even mentioning that, because I got to, you know, it takes a kind word and it takes someone giving you an opportunity and a chance to change.
That's powerful.
Change is about giving them a chance.
Yeah.
You know, I think one thing that your story also reminds me, Dr. Wright, also is, you know, last year we're coming off a year that saw, you know, 2,200 folks shot and 499 murders, right? And so what goes through, you know, a father's mind or parent's mind in that reality, in that world, right? Here in Philadelphia, we have certain neighborhoods that just, you know, it's an everyday routine trauma of what possibility can happen if somebody's coming home from the second shift, night shift, on the walk from the bus home, you know, what can happen. So thank you for bringing those up.
Thank you, Edwin. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think next up right now, what we're going to do is hopefully you've been really listening and inspired by tonight's conversation as we move beyond numbness and anger, and really that numbness that comes from so many experiences that sometimes as men and boys, we're kind of conditioned to swallow things up, to just sleep it off, to rest it off, to, you know, hike it off, to, you know, work it out perhaps in the gym, but not really deal with it beyond that. Sometimes we just go to work and still have that ongoing pain, still have that ongoing internal suffering. And oftentimes, like I've been told, the implosion is worse than the explosion. And so being able to navigate those experiences, particularly as we figure out how to best provide for ourselves from a space of anger, right? We know these thoughts and ideas sometimes, and we know the tasks and duties that we're all responsible for, right? As leaders, as people in the community. And sometimes we have to bottle that anger in, unfortunately. And sometimes we have to find ways that are constructive and healthy to let those emotions out. And so, again, we're here at DBHIDS to support you in your journey. Once again, please check out the crawl for ongoing resources and supports. And please continue to contact us after this evening's program for more help and assistance. With that being said, I want to bring up all of our guests for our final portion for some conversation. And I'll have you bring in perhaps the first kind of line of questions, Dr. Wright, if you can.
Sure. Absolutely. First of all, gentlemen, thanks again so much for taking the time to share yourself with us and with the viewing audience. I think there's a common denominator through all of your stories, and that is that each one of you, even though you've had some challenges, you've come through the other side and you've taken those challenges to the benefit of others. And I think that is just such a common thing. And real quick, one thing that we mentioned was anger. And I think it's so important because you guys have touched on it. And that I should really explain that anger is an emotion like any other emotion. Anger gets a bad rap sometimes, right? Because we think of it as negative. Anger is an emotion like any other emotion. It's what we do when we're angry that sometimes causes people to have a negative connotation about it. And so each of you have said, when I got angry, then I figured you were motivated to do better. Edwin just told us he wanted to be like that gentleman he saw. And each of you said, I'm going to improve myself. I'm going to do something different. So for each of you, if you would answer this question, each of you, how have you taken what you experienced, which we've all identified as trauma, and turned it into something where you've taken that anger, that numbness, and were able to reconnect with your feelings yourself, that healing, and then turn that into something that not just benefited you, but benefited those around you? We'll start with Shay, and then go to Neil, and then Edwin. If you would all answer that question.
Sure. When I was told that I couldn't become a citizen because of what I did when I was 19, now I'm, going to be 33, I was angry, but I didn't have like an outlet because it kind of felt like nobody cared. I told a few people and they were like, okay, so don't become a citizen. And they didn't quite get it. So one of the things I did is I started a TikTok. Called My Undocumented Ass. And it was all about all the BS that I had to put with being undocumented. And I did videos, and in 2 months, it went from 100 people to almost 11,000. And I'm not just saying it for the numbers, that almost nearly all those 11,000 people have been other undocumented individuals or people who are married to undocumented people. And just having us be able to speak, I've learned that every single Latin American nation has a very different experience with the immigration system, and something that I was blind to before. And I love that we've all found each other on my little TikTok, and we all pretty much, a lot of us undocumented people talk every day, and we share videos and information, and we call hotlines when one of us has been taken, and it feels less lonely. It feels less like somebody would just grab me by the collar and put me in a box and make me disappear. I feel like now I'm a little more seen, and I'm a little less scared of that happening.
Thanks, Shay. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, for me, it's about connecting with people who I think need to hear my experiences. And some folks I share, and I'm looking for sympathy because I think they're going to understand based on their own experience. And other people, I'm sharing my experience because I think they might need to flex a little bit of their empathy muscle, that they're not familiar with this experience. But because of a pre-existing relationship I have with them, I can say, hey, here's what's going on with me. You need to understand this for like me, Neil, in this moment, talking to you as my friend, as my loved one. But also, this is something that other people experience in other ways and on other days. And I'm just the messenger at this moment. So for me, perhaps unsurprisingly, given my role, it's all about telling the story and finding new outlets and finding new ways to connect people.
Fabulous. Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Neil. And Edwin, how did you turn that anger into a positive?
I think the moment I allow myself to be vulnerable, before First Person Arts, before I did Letter to My Father, Letter to My Son, I was out there advocating and speaking to young folks. And yeah, I gave a little history about me being in the streets and getting in trouble and going away. But I never really opened up about me. What was going on in my mind, my head, the trauma, the things I was exposed to. Not feeling like it was okay to say something's wrong. I'm not feeling well. That day when I did the First Person Arts, a Letter to My Father, Letter to My Son, I let it all out. And that moment on that stage, when I let it all out, it felt like just weights were just falling out. But at the same time, the response I got back from people were just amazing about, hey, they were comfortable with opening up about their issues also.
Thank you, Edwin. I think one of the interesting pieces about this is the name of the program, From Numbness to Anger. And I would say that that's a bi-directional path sometimes, and each of you have kind of talked about, a period in there where maybe it wasn't anger, but it was just not feeling anything at all because you were tired. You talked about that, Shay. Certainly you described that, Neil, and just frustrated and tired, throw your hands up. And certainly, Edwin, you've done the same. What I'd really like to have you kind of talk about really quickly is the fact that you can feel anything at all, and how powerful that is. That, you don't want to be numb. You don't want to be numb, but you want to feel something. And you didn't just feel something, but now you have a variety of things that you can feel because you're sharing it with all of us. So no particular order. Anybody want to address that? And then we can, and then we'll start moving toward, and Gabe, I think, is going to wrap us up.
Yeah, I can start that. Being able to identify what I was feeling is a skill that I acquired well into adulthood. And it's been a really interesting couple of years where it's one thing to just say, am I having a feeling at all? And then go on beyond that and say, I need a label for this. Maybe it doesn't feel like the perfect label, but I got to start somewhere. Otherwise, I'm just going to fall down to this numbness hole forever. And that doesn't seem productive. I knew that much. So working towards, I don't want to call it a system, but a practice of labeling emotions and recognizing, what does this feel like? What does that feel like? What do I do with that once I identify it, has done wonders.
Shay?
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Jay. We can't hear you.
One of the things that happened to me, one of the last time I was rejected for citizenship, I for some reason really started to, other than starting the TikTok, wanted to kind of know more about other experiences. And it's true, I guess I let myself open up a lot more, have a lot more empathy for people who are going through what I'm going through. I remember watching Immigration Nation on Netflix, if anybody has a chance to watch that. And I was bawling. I was bawling every episode because I saw the parents being ripped away from their children. I saw the callousness of these ICE agents, and it made me want to love my community so much more and just be there for them and just be as freaking loud as I could for them, because I just saw how scared they were, and I felt for them every episode.
Well, as for me, something I forgot to mention earlier, in my office at the school, this is when the world was open, I have a punching bag. So I know that students are dealing with certain things. So when they come in, I can read their emotions because they're feeling it. So I'm trying to I tell them, write down what you're feeling. Write down what you're feeling. And whatever you're going through, I don't even want to look at it. Tape it up on that bag. You got to give me 3 minutes. Some of them are beating away at the bag. Some of them just fall down and start crying. But once they're finished, they're ready to go back to class. And the teachers and everybody comes out, well, what did you do? We did nothing. He had to deal with that emotion. And it was okay. But you mentioned something earlier, I think, about it's okay to be angry. For me, I think being able to feel now protects me, right? I'm okay with not texting somebody back, and not worry about their feelings. I know the energy I'm getting, right? Certain family members, I love them, but I give them a time limit now. 30 minutes, I know how I'm going to feel around you. Another 30 minutes, so I got to go because I got to protect me. I got to protect my mental health. I love you, but I got to go. So it's okay to feel because it protects you. If not, you keep burning.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would just ask, one last final question, which is, if you could give, one word of advice, to all of our participants tonight, as they continue to navigate through numbness and anger, what would you say? Maybe we'll start with Neil.
My thing, and maybe this is clear based on how I've answered the other things, is find support wherever you can. Find supportive friends, whether that's, a Facebook group or some anonymous forum of people who can identify with you, or it's formal therapy or a hotline that you need. People are there to listen, and it's been incredible to me over the years. Whatever I'm going through, I'm not alone. And I get reminded of that all the time. And everybody should be able to reach out.
How about for you, Edwin?
She would say love. love conquers all. Just learn to get up and love, and just quick shout out to my sons that are watching. I love you. Thank you for watching, Dad.
And Shay.
I think I'm picking up from Dr. Wright here, one of the conversations we had, but you did mention about it's about reaching out to people that don't just hear your experience, but they know your experience, because then you need a lot less words. You know what I mean? They just know exactly why you're hurting, and they know exactly why you're crying. And it's just always reach out to people in your community, because I promise you, even when you think that you're alone, there is somebody there that knows exactly what you're going through, and you can heal together.
Right.
Yes, well, thank you for that. Just courage. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your just wealth of insight. That's really been quite beneficial this evening. So thank you all. Give them some love in the chat. All right, give them some love in the chat. They were fantastic. We also want to thank Ali Sadiq, who had to continue on as he shared with us. So unfortunately, he couldn't join this part of the panel, but he gives us his best. He gives us his positive thoughts as he just hit the stage just now down in Tampa, getting ready for the Super Bowl. And with that being so, though, one of the folks, as promoted, was supposed to be on the show this evening. We know that some of you all came to hear from also John Brandt. Unfortunately, some recent news came up within him and his family, so he was not able to join us this evening. But we want to continue to show love and support for the Walter Wallace Jr. family and all they've had to go through as far as their traumas as a result of what happened on October the 26th of 2020 right there in West Philadelphia. So we want to show love to John Brandt. And also, just in the spirit of our brother Che Guerrero and Ali Sadiq, one of the individuals who was on that show also has passed away. And so we want to say rest in peace, rest in power, rest in powder, paradise, and rest in punchline to the great Chris Cotton, one of the greatest comedians here in the city of Philadelphia, South Philly zone. We want to give shout to him, his family, his energy, who's always with us as well. So rest in peace to the great Chris Cotton. With that being said, we're going to close up shop by saying thank you again for this evening's conversation. Thank you again for being a part of it. Thank you for joining us, all the families, all the loved ones, all the roommates, the neighbors, our colleagues at DBHIDS, our colleagues at First Person Arts, and just you for being a part of this EMOC journey. As you've seen at the bottom, there is a wealth of resources. Hopefully you'll be able to share that with yourself and your loved ones. But more importantly, this is a journey, right? This is a continuum. We are working together to make sure that we can come together and provide those critical supports for our communities and ultimately for the entire city of Philadelphia. Our EMOC team, Engaging Males of Color, is committed to that mission, to that vision of a thriving population. And we hope that you will continue to partner with us and work with us as we strive towards those goals. That being said, have a great evening and enjoy the rest of your week. Stay strong, stay empowered. Take care and good evening. Good night.